Good Sunday afternoon, Frank. Here we are, mid-May. I sometimes want to be like, I sometimes want to be like Bruce Buffer and say, "And we are live." But that may not be the right way to introduce things. But I hear you have some background noise, so I'll be just kind of muting that in just whenever we're passing back speaking to set things off, just to help things out there. So how are you doing?
Yeah, again, hi everyone. I apologize for that background noise. I'm out and about, so this is the best I can do today. That's the thing, though. The best we can do is what we got to do under every circumstance. Sometimes the best you can do ain't gonna be all that impressive, but this is it. To make it work, to keep that commitment in public, more background noise than I would like. Fortunately, my voice carries, so we should be pretty good. Let's dive in. I think we don't always talk about the UFC, but last night was conversation worthy. There were just a lot of excitement and a lot of big moments. So I like to piggyback whenever whenever something happens that justifies that. We're not just a post UFC podcast. That's not what we do per se. We're looking at how the lessons of martial arts carry over. But last night was one of those. I mean, from Jacare getting his arm broken again, right? He got his arm broken against Roger Gracie and was infamous for getting his arm broke and then just hiding the broken arm. He didn't tap against Roger Gracie, continuing the fight. That's legendary. Finishes the jiu-jitsu match with a broken arm and never showed any emotion. Was ironic. Last night he fought that up and coming prospect Andre Muniz, who's just like going to be a handful for anybody. And Muniz breaks his arm, and Jacare is as calm as can be. Obviously has an amazing pain threshold and is of such a calm state of mind that within 60 seconds or so of defeat, Jacare is conversational with the guy who just beat him and is like kind of, jovial and smiling, like, good job. I mean, just that was remarkable, right? That was remarkable. Charles Oliveira's comeback against Michael Chandler. We'll talk more about that throughout the podcast. That was amazing. Even more amazing is Charles Oliveira. And again, when we talk about these things, Noah, we're talking about what does this mean for my life? So if I'm watching a UFC, what are my takeaways for my life? Like that's the thing we're talking about. We're not just talking about what did Charles Oliveira do against Michael Chandler. We're talking about the human spirit on display. We're talking about at times the human spirit at its finest in some ways. We're talking about what's in a lot of us, not what's just in these athletes. We may not be the athletes that they are, but a lot of the intangibles, the resilience, the perseverance, that's in all of us. And what we're talking about is how do we reinforce or inspire a lot of the qualities you see in your favorite athlete, in your favorite whoever, your favorite artist. How do we tap into that? Or how do we reinforce it? Maybe you already have it in abundance, but you have to constantly feed it and reinforce it or else you lose it, right? It's like a muscle. If you're not exercising that resilience, if you're not exercising that fighting spirit, if you're not exercising that persistence, that patience, that faith, it's like a muscle. It will atrophy. You will lose it. It will diminish. So when I was watching Charles Oliveira yesterday, I mean, after the fight, there's a lot of awesome fighters. I can't think of a time that I was happier for a fighter. And I don't know Charles Oliveira, and I've never considered myself a big fan. I mean, I'm not like like Charles Oliveira is not like in my my house or anything like that. But for a guy to have 28 fights in the UFC, okay, very few fighters ever make it to 28 fights. And they're hit to take 28 fights to finally earn a title shot, a world title shot. And then to come back the way he did last night against Michael Chandler. And then to see him jump. I know you're not supposed to jump the octagon. I know you're not supposed to. To see him jump the octagon, put blood on the side of Dana White's face, go to Joe Rogan, go hug like some friends or family in the arena, which you're not supposed to do, but he did in the jubilant experience and the euphoria of that moment. And then to see him hugging the belt and cradle the belt, it reminded me of like Michael Jordan when he won his first title with Chicago Bulls, and he's kissing the trophy, and it's not just joy. There's something else. Like what I saw in Charles Oliveira yesterday winning the belt, everybody's emotional when they win the belt. Everybody's like whatever. But when I saw him cry, when I saw everything, I was like, this is like the best reaction I've ever seen to someone winning a UFC title, honestly. Like that might be the best reaction I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And what I thought is, man, this guy deserves it. And I was so happy for him. You know, Noah, when's the last time you were just so happy for someone you didn't even know, and you saw them have a moment, you saw them have a euphoria, and that guy, I mean, he's got 8 losses. This is a guy that you know, he came close at times. It just looked like he was going to be a gateway contender. There were years where Charles Oliveira did not have the look of a future champion. He had the look of a gateway fighter. This is the thing, Noah. I remember when Charles Oliveira, I would watch him fight when I could see the quit in him. I remember fights in years ago when I could see the quit button in him. He didn't have that thing that like Dominic Cruz or even Michael Chandler or Randy Couture had. He didn't. Guess what? He figured it out. He cracked the code. He grew in mental toughness over the years. And just to see him yesterday, wow, I was so happy for him, man. It was amazing. What about you? What were some of your takeaways from last night?
You know, I'm in parallel with what you're saying and agreement. The way I perceive this is, you know, we can't. Don't you want to? You wish that you could be like a GoPro camera and you could go back into his life and watch all the nights, the days when he was going through the process of becoming the champion, years and years in the making. You know, this is 28 fights. This is not something that's overnight, and that's what for the listener. I'm speaking directly to you, and this is a process. I want to say that if you think about how you approach this and with his technique and his skill, I think there's like a massive amount of rules that you write into yourself. It starts out, and I brought this up before in a prior podcast of how do you develop mental toughness, and I think part of that mental toughness is, you know, you start to have you create an elaborate rule set about yourself and about how you perform things. You know, when you hear Hickson Gracie talk about as he establishes when he establishes a position, he's like, there is no going back. It's only going forward from there. I'm only going to keep moving forward. That's a rule set in your mind. So to be as strong, and I'm going to ask you this, Frank, since you're a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Robert Drysdale, can you think about when you're on the mat and the difference between you and I, besides our physical sizes and things like that, you have a rule set that you live under that says, I will not let this, you know, I will do this, I won't do that, I won't put my hand on the mat whenever I am on top. And so that's a whole rule set. Go ahead.
It's a great it's a great observation that you're making, which is sort of the rules we have in our own mind that guide us for better and for worse. When I'm training with someone, and I'm much older now, even today, when I'm training with someone within 10 or 20 pounds of me, in general, within 10 or 20 pounds, which is a lot. When you have two grapplers that are similar in skill and age, and one is 15, 20 pounds heavier, that's actually a significant amount of weight, okay? When the skill sets are fairly equal. When I'm on the bottom, again, whether it's in training or a tournament, I'm pretty comfortable with somebody my size, even somebody of high skill, I'm most of the time when I'm in a bad spot or they pass my guard or even if they mount me, I am surprisingly comfortable. Now, I don't mean to say that, oh, what a great position, and I have no urgency to get out of there. I'll just chill there. But what I mean is relatively surprisingly comfortable. One of the things in my head is I know that for my training partner or the opponent to submit me, that they're going to have to advance the position. And what I'm thinking, one of those rules in my brain, like what you're talking about, is he's going to give me a window to escape. He's going to move ever so slightly and give me that opening. And I'm very confident of that from years and years and years and years of being in that position and understanding how to get out of there, how to be Houdini when you have to be, how to be hard to kill. What I'm thinking is, hey, Frank, you're not in a great spot. You need to turn this around. Yes, there's that. But I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to get all spazzy. What I'm thinking is, hey, man, do you want to finish the job? Do you want to try to submit me? Because when you do try, that's my moment. You're going to give me my moment. You're going to give me my opportunity. And I'm going to turn adversity into opportunity. And that is a dominant rule in my brain when I'm in a bad position. Now, there are exceptions. If I'm out there with somebody who outweighs me by 40 pounds and they're just this wonder kind and they're putting, this crazy, crazy amount of pressure, then there are other conversations that can be had. There are times where the position is just miserable and horrible. But by and large, in general, with someone of my size, the narrative, the rule set in my brain is what you said, Noah. It is very much like, okay, I'm getting out of here. And you're going to help me, Mr. Opponent. You're going to help me because for you to finish the job, you're going to have to make adjustments. You're going to have to adjust your weight. I know you have to. And I keep my calm. And that is sort of a rule set too, where something in Charles Oliveira of many years ago, that fight would have probably been over at the end of the round one. He probably would have took a way out. I mean, he fought through it, and he changed. There's a narrative in fighting. I used to see this in boxing too, because I was a big boxing fan growing up. I was a boxing fan before I was anything. Before I was involved in wrestling, jiu-jitsu, I was watching boxing. And there's a belief that if a fighter ever quits on their stool, like in boxing, quitting on your stool is like the worst thing. Like it's one thing if the ref stops the fight, it's another thing if the doctor stops the fight, it's another thing if your corner stops the fight. But there's like almost this unspoken rule in boxing. You're not allowed to be taking a beating and just quit on your stool and say no mas, like Roberto Duran did. You're not allowed to do that, right? That was a rule before there was all this attention on concussions and brain injury. That was how people thought. And so whenever you saw a fighter quit on their stool, especially like a world champion or someone who's really good, and that's happened over the years, people are like, oh, what a quitter. They put that label on Jamie Varner. They put that label on boxer. I think his name Jesse Ortiz. I think it was Jesse Ortiz. I might be messing the name up, but a famous boxer. They put those labels on him. Well, guess what? I've seen fighters who quit in fights become non-quitters. I've seen quitters temporarily become non-quitters in future events. You can go from being a quitter to a non-quitter, to someone who pushes through. You can work that muscle. The problem is for a lot of people, when they have that quit button and they're quitting on themselves and they're quitting, they become shamed by it. They become permanently shamed and permanently scarred, or almost like a stigma or a scarlet letter. And they're worried about what other people think, and they never recover. But if they put the work in, they can go from being a quitter to someone who goes a lot further, someone who pushes it like Charles Oliveira did last night. That was something I really thought about, and that's hope for a lot of people to realize that just because you quit on yourself, in other situations years ago, doesn't mean you can't build upon that and improve upon it. You can. We're really hard on quitters in our society, especially America, where we're like first place or nothing, right? Second place is the first loser. We're really hard on people who quit. if they run the marathon and they quit. I mean, if you think about it, Noah, and I was talking about this with a good friend yesterday. This is amazing. We were talking about the old days of jiu-jitsu here in Las Vegas, and even Ken Shamrock used to do it like this. A lot of great boxing gyms over the decades do it like this. In the old days, when you went into a boxing gym or even a wrestling mat, or even like Ken Shamrock, the Lion's Den, when you wanted to train back in the day, in the old school ways, jiu-jitsu, you were pretty much greenlit on day one. What do I mean by greenlit? I mean, there was no, hey, today's your first class. Let's just show you hip escapes and be gentle with you. You were thrown to the wolves. You were Shark Tank, because the old school mentality, which has been the longest mentality in the sport, in the history of these sports, the old school mentality has been the dominant one for most of the years. There's a different mentality now, but this new mentality is only like, 6, 7 years old for the most part in terms of becoming more popular, right? Some people might have been doing it years ago, but the old school way has been the way it's been done mostly throughout history, which is, listen, you just showed up at my gym. I got to see, are you a quitter or are you not? And if you're a quitter, I don't want you. We don't want you here. We only want lions. This is only for the lions. This is only for the high achievers. This is only for the people that go through the fire. And you better bring that very early on in your experience, because if we can break you, we don't want you here. We're going to run you out of the gym. That mentality still exists, and that mentality has existed longer than the opposite mentality. That mentality has been, most of the sport has been on that watch. So it's like, think about that. Think about how many people we ran away in boxing. Like I've always said, if I was a boxing coach, and I've done some boxing sparring, and I do a lot of footwork movement, punching the bag and this and that, but I'm certainly far from a pro boxer, far, far, far. But I do love boxing, and I do shadow box, and I have done some sparring, and I love the sport, and I know quite a bit about the sport compared to most people. But if boxing was my thing and I was specializing in it, I would be almost like the Mr. Miyagi of boxing. I would be like, listen, you're going to come in for the first 5, 6 months. You're going to hate me, and we're going to work on foot movement and head movement and defense. Because we know that what holds most people back is they don't like to get hit. They're always worried about getting hit, and they don't learn. But what do we do? What do we do in boxing? We throw people. We still do it. We throw them to the wolves with the striking. We let them get punched early. We teach them offense. We don't teach people defense early in boxing. They teach them offense. This is how you throw this. This is how you punch the bag. Spar this person. It's the same bullcrap. Let's see how tough you are. Let's see if you're built for this. Instead of the patience, the opposite approach, which would be, listen, you don't have to be the toughest person in the gym today. You don't have to have all that heart. We'll build you up over time. But let's teach you, first of all, some good fundamentals, footwork, head movement, how not to get hit. And then when we do get you hit, we're going to get you hit very light. We're not even going to hit you hard. For months and months, when we do hit you, we're going to hit you light. We're going to pop. We're not even going to hit you hard. And then over time, we're going to improve that. And then over a couple of years, you're going to get comfortable with people punching at you. And that's not the mentality. The mentality is still, listen, day one, week one, month one, are you built for this? Well, let's find out. Let's greenlight you. Let's put you through hell. Let's get your heart rate up. And that's been the mindset. And the reality is, if you do it that way, you know what you're going to wind up with, Noah? A lot of quitters. You're going to have a ton of quitters. And then the coach is going to think they're all quitters. The reality is, a great coach turns quitters into non-quitters, or quitters into less of a quitter. That's what a great coach does. He doesn't just bury them on day one and say, I'm going to make you throw up, or maybe, see what you're made of, and, push you through hell and see if you come back tomorrow.
That makes so much sense.
A great coach takes quitters and says, it's okay if your quit button is pretty quick today, it's okay. I'll build you up. It might take me years, but I'm going to build you up. That's a great people builder. It's not somebody who just says, just give me all the high achievers who will go through hell day one, and then you're welcome at my gym. Everybody else, you're a quitter, stay away. That's been the history of our sport for the most part. But when I see a Charles Oliveira, I see the possibility for everybody, which is you can one out in one fight. And I've seen him one out a time or two. He's a different guy now, man. He's a different animal. He's spiritually been like a metamorphosis. There's a metamorphosis that happened. He is not the same. The Charles Oliveira, who's a champion, who went through the fire last night, is not the same Charles Oliveira of 5 years ago, of 10 years ago. He is not. He is a different human. And oh, by the way, he doesn't even look the part. He came in there with the nerdy glasses. Like, if you saw that guy in street clothes, there is no way you pick that guy out of a crowd and say, oh, a future champion, world champion fighter. There's no way. He looks like dressed in street clothes. He looks skinny. He looks so happy-go-lucky. He looks like a book nerd. By the way, one final thing, and then I'm going to let you talk. One thing that I saw also last night that I thought was amazing. Before that title fight with Chandler and Oliveira, and that's a big moment. That's the biggest moment for both of the guys probably in their whole life, right? That's their life. That's their dream for years and years and years. There's so much at stake. Chandler enters the ring first. Oliveira comes in the ring. When Oliveira enters the ring, before Bruce Buffer even does the announcements, he jogs around the cage. Remember that? And what does he do? He jogs around Chandler. He looks at Chandler. Chandler looks at him. He shakes Chandler's hand, and they give each other a quick hug. I've never seen that before a title fight. These are not guys who used to be training partners, by the way. They're not like, oh, we both trained at ATT or something like that. I thought that was like, and I knew both guys were going to bring it. So one of my friends is like, oh, that's not good. That's not a good thing. You shouldn't do that. I'm like, it's going to have zero bearing on the outcome. These guys are both going to bring it. There's so much at stake. But think about that before the biggest moment when a lot of people have to demonize that other guy. They have to hate that other guy. They have to think, oh, he's going to take something from me. He's going to do whatever. He's taking everything, and he's in the way of my dream. And you're about to go in supreme warrior mode. And 2 or 3 minutes before you're about to go in supreme warrior mode, the biggest moment of your life, you have the presence of mind to run by that other guy, and instead of hating him, instead of being like, I'm going to destroy you today, wrong day, bad day for you, which we see so much. We see great sportsmanship after the fight. That's normal. After the fight, that reaction is normal. Before the fight, before a title fight, the biggest moment of both guys' lives, everything at stake. And they both, because think about this. Chandler could have said, hey, what are you coming up to me for? I don't want to shake your hand. Mm-hmm. I'm damn sure not going to step in and give you a hug.
Yep.
Guess what Chandler did? Chandler said, oh, I'll shake your hand, and I'll lean in and give you a little hug. Good luck, buddy.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Frank, I want to stick just for a few more moments with what we're talking about here, because I've been struggling to figure out a way to understand and a framework for understanding how do I build mental toughness. And, through the process of this pandemic, I was going through a lot of books, listened to a lot of books, and I came across some things. And it's a lot of material has helped me get to where I'm at right now and understanding. Mm-hmm. If I were to take my stepdaughter and I would say, here, do calculus, do some partial differential equations, and I mean, not only that, but here's a screen, a blank screen with a pulsing cursor. Write me a program that launches rockets into space. You can't get there from here. We got to do. When you do math, you start with the concept of 1 and the concept of 0, and a number line. In programming, your first program is usually called you print "Hello World." Okay.
Yep.
So you start from there. You have to start from there with the lessons, and you create. And I want to talk about. I mentioned the word code. Okay. So another way of saying rule set is your code, your operating code, and. Just to keep this conversation focused, okay, on building oneself towards the black belt in jiu-jitsu, okay, skill development. most of the experience on the mats, when you're on the mats and you're rolling, you're learning what not to do as opposed to what to do, and you're learning what works, and from positioning and response, placement, timing, all those things. You're learning what to do, your rules. But I want to keep this a little bit simpler, and saying, that's technique when you're learning technique. But there's also, what I say is rules. Okay, rules about, like for me, I'm overweight right now, so I can't just go from here to being a lean mean fighting machine. I'm going to have to institute some. I'm going to have to go and institute some rules. Change my code around. Change my code around movement. Change my code around habits. Change some things. So I have to implement some code. And it's not just rules that take away things or forbid things. It's to amplify behaviors. So I wanted to get your thoughts on, we've gone through a whole pandemic. A lot of people have been not moving as much, seating, you know, in a very basic sense. You were to talk to me, not in that Shark Tank mentality, but in this simple rule, setting myself up. Where do I go from here? Couch potato. And I don't sit on my couch that much, but what I'm saying is, what would be some basic guidance you get for someone, an out of shape blue belt needs to get back into jits, get back on the mats and get rolling regularly.
Yeah,
And
well,
you can speak
first
to
of all,
me. You can speak to me
yeah,
directly because
yeah,
I'm the muse here for
yes.
that. That's okay. I
First
can
of all,
take it.
before I answer the question of how do you, how do you go from, and we're exaggerating, but being basically a couch potato and not being in shape and not working out much. How do we get out of that rut and get marching toward higher ground, right? And before I say that, though, I do want to say we were talking about. I was saying talking about coaches and coaches, traditionally just trying to find the quit button on students very early on and just get them out of the gym. Now
Yeah.
that's changed. That's changed a little bit. And what's interesting is part of that's changed because of the money. A lot of the coaches, if there was no money involved, they would just want to get rid of the quitters very soon and just only deal with, the winners. But
Okay.
because when there's money involved, when there's a financial incentive, I think that that has motivated coaches to be like, hey, I can't just weed everybody out because there's a financial opportunity there. The more students, so the bar has been lowered in some instances, but in some ways that's a good thing because that creates true jujitsu for all. And now we're building people who might be quitters or quicker to quit. We're building them up slowly, month by month, year by year. And it made me think of something. I think it was like a Confucius philosophy, like going back thousands of years ago. And it was like there's like a proverb, a Chinese proverb, and it's like there are no bad students, just bad teachers. That's to your point about like building someone up to math and with basic math. Say, listen, there are no bad students. There's just bad teachers. I
I'm
think
writing.
that's
I wrote that
very,
down.
yeah, it's very appropriate. It's like when
That's tough.
when you're a coach and your students aren't having great results, a lot of times the coaches are quick to blame the students, but at some point that's
Ouch.
your responsibility, right? That's
It,
what you're supposed to do as a coach. So
it's total
uh,
ownership. That's a total ownership concept.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
your, so be careful, by being too hard on them because you might have to wind up saying, well, how come you're not able to get the best out of them? I mean, what does that say about you as a
That's
coach?
right. That's
So,
right.
so
Accountability.
yeah. So going to the question, which most people, Noah, are where you are, which at some point, by the time everybody's 40, 45, they're going to have most people are going to have some period of their life, which is like what you're describing, where life happens, there's work responsibilities, there's, spouses or people we love get sick. Um, or we're just, for whatever reason, we're, pandemics happen, right? And so there you are, you're gaining way more weight, you're not feeling right, you're not feeling good about yourself, and so you're not
Yeah,
feeling
that's
whole.
huge.
You're not feeling whole. Because
That's
I always
right.
think of the word, for me, I think of whole, like wholeness. When you feel whole, it's like most of the day is pretty good. When you feel fractured or fragmented or almost divided in yourself, it's like some part of the day is pretty good. Then you got to read a book to motivate yourself, and you got to always be reading books or, saying mantras to motivate yourself. You're usually going through something. When you're really on it and you're higher functioning, you don't always need the mind jitsu or the reading or the mantras or the music. You don't need to lean on that as much. You're just kind of getting a rhythm, you know. But what I would say there, I remember I had this discussion with a relative of mine. One of the things that comes to mind is, so there is a lot to be said for knowing what your code is, know thyself, know what your code is, and then writing that down. And then there's a lot to be said for mindset, but there's also a lot to be said. This is another piece. There's writing your code, knowing your code, having a mindset and all the self-talk, whether you're developing that or whether you're reading Tony Robbins or wherever you're getting that, or Mind Jitsu. But the other thing is, you don't always have to change your mindset, okay? I mean, let me clarify that. It's not always about changing your mindset. It's about changing the conditions. Sometimes you can change your mindset, but if you never change the conditions, people don't exist in a vacuum. The reality is that for most people, Noah, conditions matter. I said this to my Navy SEAL friend, Tom DeJarnett, who's been on our program. We talked about this. For 1 or 2 or 3% of the population, conditions don't matter. They don't care. It's like whatever the conditions are, they're just great at something, and they don't, whatever, they don't make excuses, they're just going to crush it. Most of us are not wired that way, or if we are wired that way, we're only wired that way at a few things. Most of us are in that 97 or 98 percentile on something where we're like, wow, like the conditions matter a lot. Okay, so for the vast majority of people, the conditions matter a lot. So what I'm encouraging people is, yes, write down your code, know your code, write down 10 or 20 things right now that are going to be your code now. And then, get good at the mindset stuff, the mind jitsu, the self-talk. Read some books if you got to, listen to audiobooks. But the other thing I'm saying is, you got to change your conditions. For the vast majority of people, change your conditions. Whether that means, moving out of where you are, signing up for school, starting to eat healthier, hanging out at different places, hanging out with different friends that are where you want to be, reading different books, dressing differently, becoming cleaner, taking better care of yourself, combing your hair, waking up at a different hour. These are all conditions. The person who goes to bed at 2 a.m. every night is living under different conditions than the person who goes to bed at 9 p.m. every night. They're under different conditions. Their biological clocks are different. The person who's eating McDonald's a lot or junky food has different internal microbiome conditions than someone who's eating plant-based raw food a lot, or eating high-quality meat or whatever. There's difference. The person who's well hydrated has different conditions. Brain level, neurotransmission, detoxification has different conditions than the person who's subhydrated a lot of the time. These are all conditions. So taking a look and saying, listen, what can I do today to change my conditions? Another condition would be, are people spending most of the time indoors, trapped in the house, no light, no whatever? Are they getting outside every day to walk, whether it be 30 minutes, 60 minutes? Those are different conditions. The conditions are different. Walking out in the sun and out in the trees and breathing, they're different. Am I being mindful to breathe mostly through my nose when I'm getting 15x on the nitric oxide, 15x, or am I breathing through my mouth? Those are different conditions. They are physiologically in the human body in terms of nitric oxide to the brain and everything. It's different. Am I breathing through my mouth? Am I breathing through my nose? Am I almost like times of the day where I'm taking deep breaths and my mouth is never open, right? Those are different conditions. So the thing is to look and say, if I want to change something, You're a guy, if you've already spent a lot of time where Noah has an idea of his code and Noah has an idea of mindset, because you know a lot of mindset stuff. You're a voracious reader, smart guy. If you're not always getting the, hey, bro, we're changing the conditions today. What do you mean? Well, we don't walk much, or we walk the dog. We're going to walk the dog 2x today. In other words, if I've been walking the dog 20 minutes, I'm going to walk him for 40 minutes, 45 minutes. I haven't been doing workouts. Today I'm going to go do a different workout. Those are conditions. You know, going to the gym is a different condition. If I don't read books, I'm going to start reading books. If I go to bed at 2 a.m., I'm going to start going to bed at whatever. It might not be 10, but make it 1 a.m. Then make it midnight. Then make it 11 p.m. Right? That's changing the conditions. And it doesn't have to be dramatic. It just needs to be improvement. Hey, 2 a.m. becomes 1 a.m. 1 a.m. becomes midnight. Right? Drinking a lot of milk. You're drinking 10. You know, I have a friend, Noah. He drinks 10 cups of coffee. Those damn bulletproofs. The bulletproof coffee, right? That's so popular, right? I know that the MCT oil, the ghee butter, and I'm not saying that can't be good for you, especially if you're fasting, okay? Some people are having amazing results with it. But he's taking it overboard. He's doing 10 bulletproofs a day. He's a jiu-jitsu guy, brown belt. And I'm like, and he had a little chest pains and stuff too. And I'm like, bro, that's a lot on your adrenals. Like that's just, and not to mention even the calories, all that ghee butter, tablespoons of ghee butter and MCT oil 10 times a day. And I'm like, and he's been doing that for a while. But anyway, for him, what would I say? Change the conditions. Even if you can't, okay, tomorrow he's not going to stop drinking that. Hey bro, can we get you down to 5 a day? Can we get you down to 4 a day? Can we get you down to 3 a day? If we do that, we're changing the conditions in his body, in his brain, in his physiology, the conversation that's being had with his adrenals, with his cortisol. We're changing the conditions. So the starting point, I would say, is some people don't know their code. So that's a good place to start. Get a piece of paper and start writing down not maybe who you are, but who the hell am I going to be? Who am I? What would the best me look like? That's your code. You just start there.
Yeah.
It might take you years to really get your code, but start with, okay, what the hell would the best me look like? What would his code be? Blank, blank, blank. Well, write it down. Okay, mindset stuff. I don't know. Find your mindset guru. Tony Robbins, Joe Rogan. I don't know. There's a bunch of them out there. Find your mindset gurus, read the books, listen to the audiobooks, listen to the podcast. Check. Okay? Now you got it. Now you're on the right path with your code. Now you're on the right path with your mindset guru. But you still got to be, am I changing the conditions? It's not just change your mindset, it's change the conditions. And the conditions are, what am I eating? What am I drinking? How am I breathing? How often do I get outdoors? Do I ever dare have the sunlight touch my skin, even if it's for 10, 15, 20 minutes? Do I ever dare, or do I always run from the sun? Who am I around? Who's in my circle? Are they building me up, or are they tearing me down? Are they telling me I can't do things? Do they care about me? Do they care if I eat? Would they care if I starve? Would they help me? Are they contributing or not? What's my circle? Does my circle support where I want to go? Does my circle right now support where I say my goals are and who I am and everything? Does that fit that? And if not, it's okay. You can still have these friends, but you got to get your circle up to speed. You got to be hanging out with the people. It's like I say, you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with the most, right? Common sense. So that's a condition. Hang out with the people that are where you want to be or headed where you want to be. If you wanted to be a jiu-jitsu champion, you wouldn't go and be training, Aikido. You wouldn't be like at Aikido every single day and only training Aikido. If you wanted to be a jiu-jitsu champion, you could not train 10 years of Aikido and nothing else. You couldn't do it. It's not the same. It's a different condition. An Aikido gym is going to teach you different things and produce a different champion. I'm not saying that it doesn't work. There's some great Aikido techniques. But it's not going to make you a jiu-jitsu champion. So if you say your goals are to go wherever, look at the conditions of who's around you, because who's around you is what's in your mind and where you're going. Who's around you, it's like we say with people, like we want, but how people spend their money tells you a lot about them. How people spend their money, how they spend their time, and who they spend their time with tells you a tremendous amount about people. Tells you, it doesn't matter what we say. What do they spend their money on? How do they spend their time? And who are they spending their time with?
Cool. Hey, Frank, I got to jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to jump in real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt you because I still want to hear you.
Sure,
It's just
sure.
that it looks like your device is doing something that the video is degrading a little bit. In case it drops you, I'll wait for you to hop back on. But the audio and video is a little. It's like it's degraded in quality there on your end. Just going to give you a heads up on that.
You want
Okay.
me to go in and out?
Yeah, try that. I'll wait for you because I know it's fast. Everything he's saying is just good stuff. Um, he's not using me personally in all of his examples. We talk a lot, but I've just finished listening to a book by James Nestor called Breathe. And this thing he's talking about, breathing through your nose, is really cool because it's so calming to breathe and through your nose. Hey, Frank.
Yes, sir.
All right, that looks like that's solved the problem.
Thank you.
Good. Yeah.
But
It
you
just
go ahead. I'm sorry for that filibuster. Go ahead.
no. Well, I asked you the question, and whenever you started talking about conditions, you laid that out very clearly to me. And
Yeah.
when you started talking about conditions, I was a little confused, but then you kept going and you built that out for me. Those are like your parameters. When you talk about conditions, your parameters, your inputs, and that's a lot to it. The quality material going in. And I guess with you saying that, I'm reflecting upon my own situation and applying that in my mind quickly. You talked about nasal breathing more, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you pick on me in the past, which is a great thing about how much I'm a book nerd. But I'm literally finishing up a book by James Nestor, and it's called Breathe. And I think about it's just talk about all the healthy benefits of it, where we don't need more oxygen. We don't need more oxygen. What we have to do is manage our levels of carbon dioxide in our bloodstream, and breathing in. The more you breathe in through your nose, the more you can breathe in through your nose. You look at Hickson. Wasn't it Hickson on the beach there doing his pranayama of nasal breathing, that quick fire breathing he was doing through his nose. Um, you know, it's you're talking about breathing through the nose. That is when I'm rolling in jits, do you follow is one of your blocks of code, which is I'm going to remain calm when I'm rolling and I'm going to breathe through my nose. Is that something that you practice?
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, I am having some disturbance in terms
Okay.
of the connection that you said. I think what you said is you're talking about breathing and breathing through the nose,
Yeah.
and you're asking me about my experience with that,
On the mat.
that how that impacts me on the mat. Well, like I've said, I mean, every breath you take corresponds with a state of mind. So breath indicates state of mind. If someone has labored breathing, I don't need to be a mind reader. I already know that their mind can be racing. If their breath is racing, I know their mind is racing, right? I can tell. I mean, you've never seen, if you think of the spazzy white belt in your class, the spazzy white belt is never like breathing as calm like Hickson Gracie or a monk. It's never
Mm-hmm.
happened in history. There's never been a spazzy white belt that was breathing like very calm and deliberate. Like there's never been a spastic white belt that had like 50 beats per minute heart rate. There's never probably been one ever. They would make Guinness. Like the spastic white belt, their heart rate is almost always north of probably 90, 100, well north of 100, right? I mean, their heart, I mean, they go hand in hand, right? So we know you're going to be a better decision maker with a slower, deeper breath through the nose. We know you're going to have way more nitric oxide, which is the energy, right? So you're going to have way more energy and better blood flow. We know that you're going to play a better chess game. You're more likely to make the right call. We know you're going to fight longer. So one thing, like I trained the other day, yesterday, it was amazing. I trained with an old training partner of mine, Sonny Nahara, who's one of my favorite training partners. He's a black belt. I think he's a 3-stripe black belt now. And he's about 150 pounds, Hawaiian. We'll have him on here, by the way, in the near future. Can't wait to have him on. But I remember training with him yesterday, and I remember we were sitting out because there were some rounds where he was going with someone else, and I was sitting out, and then I was remembering myself. I was like, all right, when the next round you get in there, I want you to be focused on your breath. I remember just thinking that, like, because what I was thinking is, when you get away from the breath, you're more likely to have the monkey mind where you're thinking about other things, whether it's, because sometimes what a lot of people have is we're thinking about, I don't know. There's times on the mat where you're not always thinking about doing your best. You're thinking about like being a good training partner sometimes, as opposed to just doing your best. It's weird. So when I think about my breath, I don't get in the way of my performance. In other words, I'm like, let's see how good you can be. I don't limit myself. When I'm focused on the breath, I feel unlimited. I feel like the next roll I could be capable. But if you don't think about the breath, sometimes you're just kind of used to being where you are. I know this is weird, but this is actually how it is. Like, you kind of get used to being where you are in training, and you just kind of stay at that level sometimes. Because you're like, well, okay, I'm rolling. It's kind of like what I said to you when people do hip escapes. There's doing hip escapes 1,000 times and just doing them because you're supposed to do them because the coach says, do the hip escape, do this drill. There's just doing it. And then there's really being aware, like a sense of awareness of the finer details of it, and always trying to improve that hip escape. There's a difference between doing 1,000 hip escapes and doing 1,000 hip escapes mindfully and with the intention of constant improvement, constant little tinkerings. There's a big difference in that. And so one is more unlimited. When you have that mindfulness or that awareness of your hip escape, that's more unlimited. How good can my hip escape be? But most of us, when we do the hip escape, we're just thinking, my hip escape can't be that incredible. It's getting good. I do them a lot, and it's getting better. But we have no idea of, like, we're ignorant of how good your hip escape can be. We're like, I can't get that much better. It's a freaking hip escape. Like, yeah, how great's it going to get? Mine's okay. I mean, yeah, I can get a little better, but it's not this holy grail of anything. We think. But if you had a more unlimited mindset, you'd be like, I want to do the perfect hip escape every time. I want to know every little detail. And that's more of an unlimited mentality, because you're not, the first mentality, you're putting a limit on how good a hip escape can be. You're setting the bar lower. Yeah, my hip escape, I'm doing it. I'll just keep doing a lot of them and my hip escape will be good. But there's a limit. There's actually a limited mindset there. The mindset of I'm going to constantly, the mindset almost like the paradox of I want to do the perfect hip escape, but I can never do the perfect hip escape because I can always improve it, right? Yeah. So the paradoxical truth of that mentality is actually unlimited. It's kind of like you're always chasing the perfection, even though you know you can never have it. So you almost have a white belt mentality about a hip escape. You're like, bro, I can always get better at my hip escape. I can never assume that I can never go through the motions because I can always do it better. And so that's how I feel with breathing. Breathing is this unlimited thing, because if you're focused on it, your spirit is just like, it's ready to be like better. It's ready to be greater. It's ready for you to get the hell out of the way of how good you can be, because you're just only focused on the breathing and you get out of your own damn way. When you're not only focused on the breathing, the monkey mind comes in, and the monkey mind is there subconsciously telling you you're tired, telling you you're this, telling you you're not good enough, telling you this training partner is better than you, and you're worried about nonsense and you limit yourself. When you focus on the breathing, you get the hell out of the way of yourself. Maybe you do lose whatever, but you're just focused on your breathing and being fully present and doing your absolute best. And that is a mindset over a long time of unlimitedness. You don't know how good you can be, and you're not going to get in the way of it. So that's the importance. When I said that to myself with the breathing, I'm like, get the hell out of your own way. Have fun. Focus on your breathing. Don't worry about any of the whatever. Go out there and be. Now, I'm not saying you can do that with every role, because I've been doing this a long time. If you haven't been, you might be reminding yourself of technical things. But when you get more evolved at this, Hickson Gracie, myself, you can get out of your own way more. That's the beauty of breathing. The beauty of it is, get the hell out of here. You got, most of us are monkey mindedness. We got things going on subconsciously. We have no clue of the conversation that's happening. We have no clue the conversation. People think their subconscious mind is turned off when they're on the mat. They're wrong. It's only off if you turn it off. And the only way you'd really turn off the subconscious mind, which most people's subconscious mind is playing doubt and fear, anxiety, and worry, even when they're on the mind, even when they're on the mat. And if you're getting on the breathing, you turn off those subconscious self-doubt, negative self-talk, and you're just in the moment. And your intention just is, I'm love this, and I'm going to do my absolute best. And it's a growth mindset. Now you at least get the hell out of your own way. It's an unlimited mindset. So that, Noah, is what I'm talking about.
I think that sounds like rule number one. You know, if we're going to talk about rules today, you know, the rules to follow, where do I start? Where do I start in building all this? You know, where would if Charles Oliveira were to say, where do I start? Because in 28 fights, in 10, 15, 20 years from now, I'm going to be a UFC lightweight champion. Where do I start? He would probably, his champion would speak to him and say, rule number one, breathe through your nose.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like, you know, that's like, you know, whenever I look at, you like, where when you look at an arch that's built out of stone,
Mm-hmm.
there's a stone in the center of that arch, and they call that the keystone, and it's that stone holds up the whole arch in the classical architecture. And so I look for patterns of my practice and the things that I do, and I look for those keystones. Like, where do I start? And it seems like it's so paradoxical to say you got to start with your breathing and breathe through your nose. And then you'd probably tell me, and then let's work on your sleep. Let's work on your sleep habits.
Yep.
Breathing, sleeping, and then eating, and then we get into what you say to yourself. As far as this past year, as simple as it is, those four elements is the basic starting block of everything. How you breathe, how you sleep, what you eat, and what you say to yourself.
Yeah. I'm sorry, you broke up there a little bit, Noah.
Let me repeat that then. I say the past year, everything I've read and what I've been focused on, the four key things: how you breathe, how you sleep, what you eat, and what you tell yourself.
Yeah, that's pretty much. And then it's just a matter of who teaches that better than others. Who's a better teacher, I guess. Finding someone who teaches that. Because all of these things have layers. I mean, even to know, you know, it's not enough to hear. You know, there's a difference between hearing and internalizing. There's a difference between hearing and exemplifying or embodying or expressing. The difference between saying and truly expressing. And saying with few exceptions. Some people, me, Tony Robbins, we have a gift with words. We have a gift with vibration. And so saying is very powerful for some people as a form of expression, but for most people it's not. Most people don't have that gift, of that oratory gift. So saying is not as powerful, but expressing it in other ways, in other artistic avenues. You know, everybody has different ways. Artistic expression comes in many different forms. And for some people, anyway. So, no, that's pretty bulletproof. Those are all Those are all fantastic things. You know, it reminded me of this. This is what I was thinking of. Is another like Chinese proverb, and I'm going to butcher this one a little bit, but I'm going to make the point, which is, if you really understand a flower, you'd understand the whole universe. The person who could understand a flower would understand the whole universe. Now, at first blush, most people will see that, and they'll laugh at it, be like, "That's absurd." They'll just dismiss it. That's ridiculous. As a philosophy major, as a philosopher, as someone who's been thinking about thinking for a long time, I can tell you that I believe in that. I believe in that simple lesson, that the person who understands a flower, really understands a flower, will understand the whole universe. Now, the mistake that people make is that they're blinded by their own ignorance. What do I mean? People assume that a flower would be easy to understand on every level. People assume something so simple as a flower. No, people would say, "Oh, I can understand a flower." If I went to college or whatever, or conventions, conferences, for 1 year, I can understand everything you want to know about flowers. Any flower, just pick any species of flower. And it's like, it's like that hip escape I was just saying. The thing about a flower is, to really understand a flower, you would have to go to the atomic level, to the neurons, to the electrons, to quantum physics, to the biology of it. There'd be so many moving pieces. Even if you understood the nutrients in it, you'd never be able to identify all the nutrients. You'd never be able to identify all the molecules. It's like the human body. They haven't identified every molecule in the human body. They haven't identified every bacteria. They haven't. They just know that there are trillions and trillions and trillions. They haven't identified. They've scratched the surface of what they've identified in the human body. And the smartest scientists will tell you that, right? There's so much going on in the human body that we don't know, that we haven't even named, that we haven't given a name to, that we haven't studied, that we haven't even identified, right? Because we don't even have the instruments in some ways, the imaging and the instruments to measure it. So a flower, to understand the whole flower, because the universe tends to mirror what's true. So this is a great metaphor for breathing. If you mastered your breathing, you would probably master yourself. Again, paradox, because you could never truly master yourself, but pursuing the mastery of yourself is noble and would help you become a much higher version of yourself. So you should pursue the self-mastery. And if you mastered your breathing, you would probably loosely, you would never truly master you, but you would master thyself. It's a great step in mastering yourself. If you have no awareness of your breathing, you're probably operating at a way, way, way lower level than you could be. Way lower level. Because a mindful person is aware of one of the simplest things, but it's so important. I mean, Noah, it's a universal law. There are universal laws in this world. One of them is, you ain't going very long without oxygen.
Yeah.
You ain't going very long without water. You ain't going very long without food. These are universal laws. Gravity, right? So breathing is the thing that's just so obvious and so important. Now we're seeing books that are devoted to it, but what's interesting about breathing, even though there's been a lot more media attention on it, is that even telling people about it, most people can't focus on their breath. You can't get most people to pay attention to their breathing for 5 minutes a day, Noah. Even when you tell them, even if they read the best-selling book on it, right? You can't get most people, I'm talking, if you take 100% of the population, you couldn't get most people to pay attention to their breathing for 3, 4, 5 minutes a day. It's that simple, breathing, but it's that hard. Think of the paradox. Think about how hard it is. Like, what's wrong with us? We know breathing is so important, but we still can't bring ourselves to focus on it for 5 minutes a day. Guess what? That tells you, oh damn, it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to master than people think. Because if it was that simple, then you'd be able to focus on it for 5 minutes a day. Yeah. But 99% of us can't. So it's a big damn deal.
Absolutely. Well, I talk about, building the rules. I've been using a digital flashcard app on my smartphone, and I've had it for a few years, and I've been using it for various rote memorization. Okay, because I found I had some difficulty in doing rote memorization. So I started picking away at that difficulty, and I was using vocabulary word lists, like Barron's vocabulary. You know, Barron's like the test prep course.
Yep.
So it's an app. It's called Brainscape, and I think I paid like $99 for the pro version of it a few years ago, and I've used it, and now I'm on this like streak. I'm on this streak. It says like number of days, where you're on the streak, and so I just made a little rule for myself. I don't get out of bed in the mornings before I do one study session. Okay, no matter how bad I gotta pee or whatever, I have a rule. I don't get out of bed yet until I do one quick. Even if I flip 5 cards, okay. So I'm up to I'm closing in on 200 consecutive days. I mean, I'm gonna be excited when I hit 1 year. But I started with something very simple, in a way, which is because I wanted to practice this thing of like, how long can I keep this? How long can I keep this streak going? I'm just curious. And then that led me to start thinking about, rules that we create for ourselves. And I've been playing with this, and I wish I remember what book it was, but I think it has to do some. But it was around the topic of mental toughness, and I'm coming just the conversation all the way back to how we set rules for ourselves. And
I wanted to, since I know we're winding down on time, and I wanted to ask you this question. So I think part of my joy for Charles Oliveira last night was also knowing, I mean, I can see in him, I came from inner city Baltimore, I came from nothing, I came from low income, desperate neighborhoods. And I know that the conditions in those favelas, I've never been to Brazil, but I know that those conditions are a lot worse than what I grew up in. So I know that what I grew up in wasn't easy. It was very hard. But if I took a look at those favelas, it would probably blow my mind. And I think you're a guy, you're married to a native Brazilian, you speak Portuguese, you're in love, you're enamored with the language. You've been to Brazil multiple times. And I think that Oliveira had said something to the effect last night of like, to the favelas, like he addressed them, like, favelas, to everybody in the favelas, one of us made it. It was something to that effect, right? In his own way. It was like the favela kid made it. And I really realized like the measure of a man is not necessarily, or woman is not necessarily what you do, it's what you overcome to get there. To me, that's my measure. It's not just what you did. It's what did you have to overcome in between. And this guy came from nothing. There was no plan B. This was his way out, right? So for you, you've been there. I don't know if you've been in the favelas, but maybe tell me about what you were intuiting as somebody who's been to Brazil. You maybe have a better idea than we do. You understand the Brazilian people more because you've been there and you speak their language too, and it's a whole different animal. I know a lot of Brazilians. I've trained a lot of Brazilians in jiu-jitsu and in fighting, but you've got a level. When you understand their language, you get a much deeper understanding. I mean, what do you make of this favela kid becoming the UFC champion, and especially in the way that he did it? What does it mean to you as a guy who's been there? Like, what were your thought processes along those lines? You've been there.
I want to tell a little story. I won't be too long, but
yeah.
So when I went to Brazil, and I went to Bahia, and that's in the shadow of a mountain called São Conrado. In English, we would say Conrado, Conrado, São Conrado, and it's right there in the neighborhood where Renzo, Hosier, the Gracies they have some family there, and I was training out of this academy, and I popped my ribs, and so I was injured right away. And so I went and I took a side trip out to the mountains, about 2 hours away by bus. And needing internet and me loving coffee, I found my way to a coffee shop there, and I saw some guys walking by, and I don't know why, but they had something um, that clued me in. Oh, he was carrying his gi with a black belt. He was carrying his gi with a black belt. And I mean, there are no jiu-jitsu academies around here that I know of. Who are these guys? So I got up and I ran across to them, and I was fairly very much beginner in my Portuguese. I started speaking to him, and he didn't speak any English. And got to talking to him, and I really liked him. He's a very down to earth person, and we developed a friendship that to this day exists. And he's grew up in the favelas, and he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and he has had this experience where he's like, I got to get out of Brazil. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's telling this to me in Portuguese. And he said, well, first off, you're the very first American English speaker student. And so I became his student, training under him. I was had a lot of private lessons because I hurt my ribs, but I wanted to continue training. Okay. I guess I got to explain that part. And so I talked to him, and we got through, and he agreed to take me on as a private lesson student. And so I was going to this gym, not a jiu-jitsu academy, but a gym, and they had some jiu-jitsu mats there, and so it was not really an academy, but they would have people come together and train jits there from time to time. So I was meeting him there. That was his job, or he worked at the gym, and he was like an employee. And he would teach a few classes. Well, I would go there and talk to him, and I got to know him, and we just from our conversations, he was very motivated to get out of the favela and to use jiu-jitsu as his way out. And he was putting himself out there, trying to find a place, find opportunities. And he goes to Kyrgyzstan and trains and teaches jiu-jitsu in Kyrgyzstan for a couple years. Goes back to Brazil, okay? And I knew him, and I knew his wife, okay? Very young. He, his first time away, he couldn't bring his wife. Okay, so he went to Kyrgyzstan, and he went back to the Brazil. And at some point, he could never take his wife to Kyrgyzstan, so he found another job in Indonesia or Malaysia. And here's this Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt, no education outside of just what he finishes in the public school, and now he runs a large academy in I want to say it's Kuala Lumpur, and I've invited him on the podcast, and he can speak to what you are saying here better than I can, because from the time that I started training with him, and I was teaching him English, he knows now to speak enough English that he teaches classes. He goes all around Asia. Like, he's competed in Singapore, he's competed in Tokyo. He came to the United States, and he competed. I want to say it's what's the WNO or something.
Fight to win.
Fight. Yeah, I think fight. He came over to the U.S. and competed in
Who's
that.
number one? Who's
Who's
number
number
one?
one?
Fight
Yeah,
Nick.
that's it. Yeah, who's number one? Who's number? Yeah, WNO. So he came over, and so he's in Asia now, and he's had a child, and the child's grown up, and his wife is now training, and I think she's a purple belt, at his academy, and he's grown this big team in Malaysia, and from this small favela to this world traveling Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt, and he's got quite a story, having competed, and I'd love to bring him on the podcast. It's just the only issue is we're about 12 to 15 hours time difference. Um, but
No,
his
it's
name's
very different. It's different from America because in America, you see fighters from many different economic stratas. You see them with college degrees and everything, every kind of story. You see them come from nothing. But in Brazil, those favelas from Jose Aldo to even I think Andre Muniz to Jacare to Charles Oliveira, I mean, those favelas have just been a factory for some great fighters, and it's just different because again, you grew up in those favelas. There's no plan B. You just pick something, whether it's soccer, whether it's fighting, whatever, music, and that's it, and that's all you got. And it's kind of like that classical burn the boats mentality. You can't, you
absolutely.
know, you can't bet a little bit on this, a little bit on this, a little bit on your college degree, your master's degree, or this. We're really, again, I don't want to be political, but in America, United States, with everything that's going on now and some of the division, I hope people don't lose sight of the fact that there is still tremendous opportunity here. Like, wake up, become aware. It's like that flower. Like, people think, oh, I could learn about that flower in a month. How long does it take to learn about a flower? A long time. Like, a lot of people are ignorant. We're blind to that. And just like we're blind to opportunities, including me at many points in my life, it's like if we just wake up, we're like, oh my goodness, we're in a place. I mean, I'm right now in Whole Foods, Noah, where you shop a lot too. And if we were to count every product, I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here I wouldn't eat. That's, I'm a very strict eater and a healthy eater. There's a lot of stuff in here. There's tens of thousands of products in this store. I mean, think about how spoiled, how much opportunity there is. Like, we're in a place where 5 miles away from me, I can choose from tens of thousands of products of what if you were a king 500 years ago or a queen, you didn't have this variety and this choice. If you were, and I'm a commoner, right? I'm a common person, common man, and I can have my choice of what. I mean, we just have so much opportunity, and seeing like a Charles Oliveira, to see a kid come from nothing. Even if I didn't know him, even if I hadn't seen his story, the reaction I saw yesterday told me just his whole energy. This kid came from nothing, and he had nothing, kind of like Francis Ngannou. Like, I just had a dream. I was just fueled by a dream. Sometimes you don't have nothing but a dream, and they just don't let go of that dream. And I'm like, wow, this guy, like, to see somebody reach that. I know he's got to still defend the title and this and that, but nobody, even if he was to lose his first title defense, for the rest of his life in the history books, he's a world champion. He's a UFC champion. And like we were talking about fighters making a lot of money. I said, I want fighters. Hopefully one day they'll be the highest paid in the world, highest paid athletes. But that's going to take time. And most people need to ask themselves if they want to sign up for it, right? It's not always the UFC's fault. People want to blame. Charles Oliveira took matters in his own hand yesterday and said, you know what? I can guarantee you this. Charles Oliveira is about to make a lot more money. I can promise you that. I can promise you that the kid from the favela, in his whatever his next fights are, by taking matters into his own hands, by taking complete ownership, complete personal responsibility, guess what he did? He didn't say, I'm being cheated, pay me. Guess what? He took matters in his own hand. I can guarantee you Charles Oliveira is about to make a lot more money in the next couple of years. I can guarantee you that. And if he's smart with his money, I can guarantee you that he's going to have some money for many years to come. Especially if he lives in Brazil and he has the conversion rate. So anyway, Noah, it's been a great podcast here. Any closing thoughts for us for the people out there watching?
I would say that, your rule sets, what you make for yourself, and you start small and you let it grow, and then testing it out. That's the deliberate practice where you get coaching, and you get the truth of the results on the mat, and running your experiments on the mat, because the mats don't lie to us. That's our reality. It's a meritocracy. Those little rule sets will add up over time. And they're so simple. It's deceptively simple, but very hard. It's
It's
so
like the
hard.
hip escape. It's like
It's
the hip
so
escape.
hard.
The hip escape, that's how the whole mindset, all this stuff of living a great life, you can know it, but you got to apply it. And then if you stop applying it, it's a use it or lose it world. It's like Jack LaLanne. I mean, I agree with Jack LaLanne. He said, most people when they get older, right? I'm just turned, 49. You and I are almost the same age. And Jack LaLanne, of course, lived to be like 95, 96, whatever he was. And he was amazingly athletic and doing very impressive things into his 80s and 90s. And he used to say, most people's bodies, when they get older, break down not because of overuse, but because of lack of use. It's not overuse that does most people in. It's lack of use. So it's a use it or lose it world. So if you're into whatever it is, whatever the great things, develop those habits. It's not enough to know the habits. It's not enough to read the book. You got to become the book. You're the living, breathing personification and exemplification of the book. And that's a day in, day out practice. That's a years long, decades long practice. And who wants to sign up for it? I do. I want to live a long time, man, because I'm a curious person. Like I want to sign up for that refinement, that constant refinement, that mastery, which actually isn't mastery, right? Just like the black belt, there is no actual mastery, but in one sense it is mastery, because you're in the business of trying to self-master yourself. You're trying to self-master Noah. I'm trying to self-master Frank. I'm pursuing that. What would the highest ideal Frank look like? What would he do? How would he speak? How would he move? What would he eat? Who would he hang out with? Where would he go? Anyway, happy Sunday, everybody. Everyman BJJ every Sunday, 1:30 p.m. On the West Coast, 4:30 p.m. on the East Coast. Noah, it's been a pleasure. I'm out. It's good seeing you, my friend. I'll see you again soon.
All right, sounds great. Take care. I'll see you again soon.
Bye,
Bye.
brother.